All right, we're live. Say hello.
Hi, Alex. How are you? Welcome to 2915 Biscayne Boulevard.
Kobi, thanks for having me, man.
Thanks for coming over.
Oh, I warned Kobi that we come out with a lot of energy, so here we go. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Alex Vidal. I am president of Related ISG International Realty and host of the show you're watching today, episode number 56 of TheCloserClub. And even though this is episode number 56, it's a first for the series where we have our first architect on the show, Mr. Kobi Karp, one of not only Miami, but the country's most renowned architects. So we have a set of questions that a lot of you haven't heard before, so here we go. Kobi, you ready?
Ready, Alex. Go ahead. Fire away.
Let's do it. Kobi, from Israel to Minneapolis to hopefully your favorite spot, Miami, where you are head of one of the most renowned architectural firms in the country. Tell us a little bit about your path to where you are today.
So I was born in 1962. And
you look great, man.
I took a shower once a week, whether I needed it or not.
Yeah, you do.
Guys from Curly, they already give me a hard time. So, but basically the bottom line is I was born in 1962 in Minneapolis, Minnesota, in Israel. And when I was 11 years old, my family moved to Minneapolis, Minnesota. I grew up the key years in Minneapolis in the Midwest. So I went from the Mideast to the Midwest, as I like to say.
Okay.
And I grew up there, junior high, high school, and university. I graduated from University of Minnesota with 2 degrees. One of them, which
they're Gophers, right?
Golden Gophers.
Golden Gophers, got it.
Pay respect.
I know you keep looking at this. This is our
I'm gonna take it home. I'm gonna steal that.
No, I'll give this. But this is not a Florida Gator, by the way.
I know it's ISG related.
It's an ISG Gator. Go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
We got stories about that. But no, the bottom line is that my first degree was environmental design from the Institute of Technology, and that became a more important diploma as life went on.
Okay.
Because what happened is that whether I designed hotels in the Caribbean, I came here in the late 80s. It was Miami Vice and Scarface days.
Okay.
So it was a bit different. Our offices were on Lincoln Road, at 925 Lincoln Road,
Okay.
where Books and Books are in the Sterling building. And what we were doing is designing hotels in the Caribbean. Jamaica, St. Lucia, Bahamas, Grenada. It was great. But what happened is that understanding the tropics, understanding environmental design and how it relates to building and designing luxury hotels and resorts became very important. Many people believe that green environmental is a way to do it, or we have to meet codes and requirements. For me, environmentally correct, sustainability correct, designing it as such is a money-saving venture. If I sell you your house or your hotel in a way that is more sustainable and more resilient, on the long term, as a property owner, as a hotel manager, as a condo hotel owner, you're saving money. So today, the houses we're designing have in them solar panels that can collect the sun energy and store it in something that is a good battery.
But we'll come back to that. But let's go back to the. So you were in Minnesota. What brought you down? What brought you down here? How'd you end up down here?
Well, they told me that they needed drug traffickers.
Oh, okay. That was a good time. That was a good time to be in Miami then, for sure.
So what happened is I joined a British firm that was building all-inclusive resorts and hotels in what they call the British West Indies. Okay. And they needed an American architect, and they hired me. And we were producing our drawings here in Miami, and then Federal Expressing them in thermofax paper back then to the Caribbean, to St. Lucia and to the Caribbean. Yeah.
Now, looking back on your career, storied career, right, what would you say was a breakthrough moment for you? And we haven't gone through the questions, so what would you say was a breakthrough moment that, because you're not just an architect, you are, for what many consider a starchitect, right? That's the new term. What was that breakthrough moment for you that kind of really took your career off, and what can our viewers learn from that?
I think the breakthrough period of time came as things were changing in Miami in a drastic fashion. What I mean by that is that, for example, in 1992, we had a hurricane. And people needed simple things like doing roof inspections. So I volunteered to do the roof inspections and to drive my Wrangler Jeep throughout and do that. And so that gave me an understanding of how buildings and structures have been built and how they're not going to be built in the future in South Florida,
okay,
which became very important throughout the United States of America, and why people hire me internationally because of our tropical, sustainable understanding of what it is here in Florida.
So let me get this right. Here you are, come down from Minneapolis, one of the biggest, even then, one of the biggest architects in Miami. The hurricane hits, which we talked about currently. That happened the summer of my freshman year, going into my freshman year. You got in your Jeep, which I knew I liked it because
Sahara Jeep.
I've had two Wranglers. I love Wranglers. There's no way to go. I have a Ford Raptor now. There's only two cars that ever own a Raptor and a Wrangler. You were driving around doing roof inspections?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had a girlfriend, and she would write down all the paperwork, and we had a 35mm Yashica camera because there was no way to track and make sure that you're doing the right thing.
Sure.
So she would write everything down, and then, I don't know, it was 150 or 250 per inspection. And we would drive from sunrise to sunset to do the inspections. And you have to remember, this is, Homestead in South Miami. Yeah. It looked like a war zone.
Now, were you doing that? Because just the architecture business had stopped, so that was a way to make means?
Yes, exactly right. There was nobody picking up the phone and calling me up and say, "Oh, come on, let's do some work." That was the only work that was available. And my girlfriend was pretty good at, collecting all the money, so I kept her around. And that was it. 25 years later, we're still married.
Is she going to watch this later?
That's in case you're watching, this is about you.
What I love about that is here you are where you weren't afraid to do what a lot of people would look at as grunt work to survive until your services.
You must do the grunt work. You must never look at it as grunt work. Because if you understand, I came from construction background in Minneapolis, Minnesota. There was no work in an office. So I was working, shoveling snow on buildings. I was framing. I was digging ditches. I was putting railroad ties for landscaping. If you are able to do that, then you become a more complete designer and architect. You become what other people have always said is the master architect. You understand construction. You understand how to build, you understand foundation, you understand the outdoors to the indoors relationship. It's very, very critical and important, and I was lucky enough to have that experience.
Interesting. I've been in real estate 22 years now, I'm 41, got in it when I was 19. I started off as the secretary to the owner of Kai's Real Estate. We're still very close today, but you said that, I'm like, I know what he's talking about. Because you're right, I went through that grunt work of being a secretary on up. Now, you've designed some of the most beautiful homes and buildings in all of South Florida. What are your high net worth clients telling you about why they chose Miami?
So, the high net worth, it's a macro picture.
Sure.
Miami and South Florida has an increase, according to the United States Census, of 1% on an annual basis. So, after 10 years, it compounds to be 10%, more than 10% because it compounds, right? So, what happens is that when I came here in the late 80s, there were still people moving here to South Florida, and those people were, generally speaking, retirees from the Northeast on a fixed income, or people who came by boat from Havana.
Sure.
Not by boat, they were paddling.
Yeah, on a raft. They wish it was a boat.
Right, they wish it was a boat. So what happens is that the 1% continues to grow on an annual basis, but the per capita and the education level of the individual has increased. So the elderly who were on a fixed income are still coming, but now they're being supported by individuals who are coming here to go to universities, to build a business, to become a service in the community, and that's what we are seeing in Florida. So I see a large, continuous growth, natural growth of the population that's coming to what is the only subtropical weather state in the lower 48. And that's important to understand, because if you grow up in Kansas or Minnesota or Wisconsin or most of the other states, you're looking for a good location to have a good quality of life. And Southeast Florida can provide you with that. Whether it's Fort Lauderdale, Palm Beach, West End, Doral, Miami. I mean, we are just now, I've been building in Sunny Isles Beach, Aventura, Miami Beach, Hollywood, but now we're starting to build downtown Miami, which has been left alone, if you will, until George Perez and company started to get involved in it in the last boom. It's been dormant for the past decades. So Wynwood and those areas are going to be what I think is the next urban fabric and districts in Miami.
So it really sounds like these guys that are hiring you and families and women that are hiring you to design these really nice homes are saying, hey, the weather here can't be beat.
The weather cannot be beat. Today's technology and the way business is done, we can work pretty much anywhere. the quality of life, whether it's social, cultural, whether it's the environmental, the medicine, the research and development of genetics, all of that is coming together in a very strong fashion here in Florida, and it's becoming a destination where it never was. It was about the sea, the sun, and the sand, and now it's completely changing around to become a bit more than that. And I see that in the next generation, meaning I see my kids who are going to school, and their friends are saying, we're coming back to Florida.
Yeah.
We don't know if we're coming back during school, after school, a couple of years out, but their future is Southeast Florida, which is very promising.
Well, it's interesting because you were seeing this big demand now coming from the domestic buyer in South Florida. And now, as a designer, and this was actually a question I told Craig, who spoke very highly of you. Craig's like, ask Kobi this question. What are the taste preferences among the high-end buyers that are the typical high-end buyers from South America, and now we're seeing the high-end buyers from North America? Is there a taste difference? Do you have to design differently for each type of customer?
Yes. So I came to Florida, as I told you, in the late 80s, and I worked doing luxury resorts and hotels in the Caribbean. And those understandings came really from, if you will, the back of house, right? I used to work in hotels and hospitality and construction, and that gave me an understanding how to manage and how to operate a restaurant so that the guest experience and the daily life experience is reached to its maximum.
Sure.
We do it in hospitality. It's where we don't cross the guest experience with the service experience unless it's needed.
Okay.
On a daily basis, we have a short life. Whether you will live 50 years or 90 years or 100 years, it's still a short period of time. So what most people want, whether it's affordable housing or luxury housing or market rate or subsidized, they want a good quality of life.
Okay.
In order to provide you that, it's very simple things. We provide right now a space that is simple, that is Zen-like, that lets you be part of the environment. Whether it's the sunrise, if you're looking to the east, or the sunset, if you're looking to the west. And if you're lucky to have both sides, it's a sunrise to the sunset. And how is that in relationship to the tropics, to the garden? Not everybody can have a view of the water.
Sure.
Some people can have a view of the ocean, which is dark at night. Some people can have a view of the bay, which is beautiful sunsets. But if I'm able to give you a tree within your environment or a landscaping and make you part of the environment, that gives you inner comfort, that gives you inner tranquility. It gives you a good quality of life.
It's so funny as you say that, because look at that's not going to come out of camera, but that's exactly what's going on the screen behind you.
Yeah, and that's what's going on the screen. That's also what's going on outside. We have a concrete bunker, but we have a green tree canopy outside, and that gives you a certain sense of tranquility and a sense of humanity, which is very important as architects and designers to provide you with.
Does that change? Is it the same if it's a buyer, if it's a high net worth buyer coming from New York, or it's a high net worth buyer coming from Rio or Sao Paulo? Mm-hmm. Are they looking for the same thing?
Everybody's looking for the same thing.
Everybody's looking for the same thing.
We're all the same. We're all individuals, and it's like architecture, buildings are the same. They're all built in the same mean and method. But you and I have the same parts of us, that ribs and heart and lungs, and hopefully they're all there, and they put us all together. But I have 2 boys. And you have 4 boys, and hopefully they came from the same father and mother, yes, like mine hopefully did.
Well, three of the 4, yes.
But they're substantially the same on the inside, but they're very different on the outside.
Oh yeah.
And same thing with architecture. Architecture is different from building to building. And what happens here is that the parts that make the pieces come together in the design are all the same. And you need to provide, as a designer, as an architect, something that gives the sense of comfort and zen and social civility to the space. And it's very, very important to provide you. You went to a school, a good school, Curly. Curly, when you look at the spatial relationships and how it sits on the side and how it relates to the green space, is very good. It's very important. And that's what creates a better environment. Even if we come to a building like this, how it is that we open it up and make it a better space, that is what we specialize in doing. We take buildings and we recycle them. We take buildings, whether it's a surf club, we bring you into the historic before we bring you into the new. And not everybody thinks that way. I had big discussions with the other architect, Richard Meyer, working on the job. He said, no, Kobi, let them come in the new part because it's ego. You want to come into the new. But no, most people want to come into the historic. They want to get a sense, and then they go into the new. That kind of process is what people live on. It's what makes people understand. When people meet people, they want to know, where did you come from? Who's your father? Who's your mother? What is
you were asking me all that when we first met.
And there's a whole show on TV now that is all about DNA, ancestry, and telling people who they are and what they're from, so they can understand who they are and they can see where they're going. The rich and the poor and anywhere in the middle want the same thing. They want a decent quality of life. More gold, that makes no difference. More stainless steel makes no difference. It's how you orient the spaces and how you compose the spaces in a three-dimensional way. Indoor and outdoor, it creates the value. Whether it's a penthouse with a rooftop terrace, whether it is a garden that is within a house with a tree growing out of it with natural light. Those are the kind of things that make or break a space. And that's what we try to do.
I love it. I think that's, as realtors who are mainly the ones that are watching this,
yes,
it really should shape how they speak to customers about the properties that they're looking at. It's not just look at this beautiful open kitchen, it's how is this kitchen going to play a role in their life if they were to buy the unit. Or the balcony area.
And like you said, Craig, I've known Craig for a quarter of a century, but what I'm able to do on an ongoing basis is to provide a vehicle for him or for her to sell the product.
Absolutely.
In a value-driven fashion. You can't bamboozle people. People see right away that they're creating value. JP, John Paul, right? We created a whole environment that is in touch with the Wynwood, but it has a secret garden on the inside with stepping rooftop terraces. That's when people go, wow, I can live here. I want to live here. It's unique. It's special. And they can see the value if the price is the same as everybody else.
Sure.
And that's what people continue to buy. Palau, we do the same thing in Palau. They did the perform on a number that was 60 to 70% of what they sold the units in, because there were things done architecturally. They created a value that people said, I want to live here. And that's very, very important to do on an ongoing basis and seeing the value in each and every building. It's like seeing the value in each and every individual. People meet people all the time, but to find the essence of each individual and use that and push it forward as the strength, you're making the person, you're making the building better, but most important, you're making yourself better as an architect. If I can find that on an ongoing basis in my buildings, in my spaces, and whether it's a large development or it's a little interior design project, it makes no difference. I'm creating a value that people then say, wow, I want to buy it. And you can't argue with success.
I think one of the favorite designs of yours is Chateau. I have a customer looking at Chateau, and the way it sits on the lot, knowing something's going to be built on the north side, so that's all concrete. Knowing that the park is on the south side, that's always going to be a park. Phenomenal job there.
And again, the idea was, people always looked at it, I want to face the ocean, right? We said, no, we want to face the ocean and we want to face sunset. And oopsie, by the way, you get to see the panorama of the park.
Sure.
What happens then is that you have a lot more glass to sell and you have a lot more view to sell, but also the quality of life within the unit is so much better.
And you walk in and you see the ocean directly from the lobby, which very few buildings
do.
Right. Now, I've asked this question to a lot of people, so I'd love to hear your answer on this one. If Miami was a person and you were to give it an age, what age would you give it and why? Let's see how you compare to the other 10 people I've asked, at least.
Well, Miami originally, when it was started to be found by the Indians who lived here on the river for the fresh water, right? So, and then you can say Miami was created and established 100 years ago. I just had the pleasure of working.
But forget all that. Like, I know Miami's been around 100 something, New York's been around for, but if it was a human being, in terms of what it's accomplished and where it's going in its future, if you were to put it in human
6 years.
6 years old. Really? Why?
Because the expansion and development of the city has not yet even reached its puberty. Only now do I start to see genetics and medicine. Only now do I start to see the logistics really come here, that is not just connected to the seaport and to the airport, but I see it through each and every county,
Sure.
right? I see the connectivity of Orlando to Palm Beach, to Fort Lauderdale, to Miami, through the train only now starting. We are now starting what we originally established 100 years ago, and we stopped. Trains, connectivity. Why is it that I need to drive to St. Pete to go see a project? I should be able to sit comfortably on the Wi-Fi in the train, get there, boom, take an Uber to the site, and come back the same day. I should not be flying there. I should not be driving there. And I do drive. I drive to Orlando to have lunch, and I come back.
Yeah.
But that's not the way it should be. Only now we're starting that. Why are we only 6 years of age? We're only 6 years of age because the state itself hasn't completed certain things. I'll give you an example. I grew up in Minneapolis, Minnesota. In Minneapolis, there's IBM, 3M, Archer Daniels Midland, there's steel companies, there's wood companies, there's Pillsbury, the billboard, there's Honeywell, there's all these companies that have been there and were created by the individuals in the community. We don't have that here. We are just now starting to create certain companies, Pan American, Eastern Airlines. What I'm working on now are things that for the future is going to be relevant for the community. That's what I'm working on now. And what I'm working on is mixed-use projects that will sustain the community. Some people are talking about it, but the projects that I'm involved in now, they're very big, they're multifunction, and they're really about creating values and creating educational vehicles. We're doing a project now that it has education and schooling within it, but it's only for the trade, for the people who make clothes, for the people who fix air conditioning units and make the cameras and fix.
That general education is very specific.
Yes. For what we used to call, arts and crafts or blue collar instead of going to college, right? I mean, I went to college, I studied architecture, but think of all the other people who build buildings and electricians and plumbers and mechanics, and where do they go to school? And that's what this project, this development is all about within a mixed use, by a train, which has affordable and sustainable and workforce housing.
How big is that building, by the way?
That is a 22-acre site, which, yes, when it will be done, we'll have residential apartments, which is about 3,500, but it will have the schooling and the community services within it. Okay. And 3,500 apartments, some people, to them, it sounds like a lot. I tell them, no, look, I work for Jose Milton, may he rest in peace, and he came to me and he said, in the late 90s, to do a project on North Bay Road, which was unincorporated Dade County before it became Sunny Isles Beach. And he said, I want to do this 3 buildings. And he built them. It's called TheCloserClub.
Yep.
And Jose built everything cash. And I said to him, Jose, aren't you scared about it? He says, no, it's 300. And he explained to me his logic and how he does it. And at the end, he was right. And I did TheCloserClub, and I did Blue Lagoon for him. I did multiple projects, which each one is 1,000 apartments in locations which are completely negative compared to where it is that we're looking at these sites right now.
Now, this is a great segue into the next question. This was another question that came from Craig, which was, 20, 30 years ago, even up until recently, a lot of the buildings that were being built, 20 stories, 30 stories, 50 stories, maybe 60. But there's a lot of buildings that are being proposed right now that are 90 stories, 100 plus stories. What do you think the feasibility of these, they're being developed in New York, but what are the feasibility of these buildings actually being developed here in South Florida? These are monsters.
I think that they're very feasible. There is a new Miami 21 code, which makes them a bit slenderer. I had a project approved for Africa, Israel, which was then approved for Tibor Hollow, which was called a MUSP, a Major Use Special Permit under the old code. So the footprint can be made bigger, and you can see it. The building is built. It's 850 feet. It's called, it's at 1101 Brick Code. It's called Panorama. Yeah. That building, Tibor called me up, and I was working in Abu Dhabi. And he says to me, Kobi, where are you? We're going to have a meeting with the structural engineer. And I said to him, Tibor, I'm in Abu Dhabi. He goes, fine. So when you come back to mine, we'll have a meeting. I can't wait. Vincent DeSimone, may he rest in peace, a structural engineer, student fellow. And Tibor said, I'm going to take the money that you owed, and I'm going to break it up into equal payments for the next 27 months. So the structural engineer says, okay. The MEP engineer says, okay. And Kobi says, wow. And then Tibor says, Kobi, the reason is very simple. It was 2009, people walking out with boxes out of Lehman Brothers. Yeah. He says, I've been through the trials and tribulations of the real estate economy. especially here in Florida. And he is a visionary, Tibor. And he said, I think it's going to take us about 24 months to come out of this issue. And I got to give myself some extra time, so it's going to be 27 months. Do you accept the payment schedule? Of course you accept it. There was nothing else going on. There was no other. Of course we'll accept it.
Beats roof inspections.
Absolutely. and you have to be humble in your thought process, but he was more realistic. And he, obviously you saw, he built the building, he finished the building, and it's a multi-generational asset. The Banco de Venezuela used to be in there, and it has changed. FIU is in there now. It goes back to what is it you and I are talking. I'm on the board of FIU. And this is the kind of things that build the community. There's a need for that. And that's what we are going into. University of Miami now is looking at architecture and planning and legal and construction all coming together as a development service. Those are the things that build the community into society. 1101 Panorama is an example. I do think.
How tall is Panorama?
850. 850. And I think those are very, and 750 is the Four Seasons. And I think that that's what's going to happen. The land value, and now everybody's wants and desires to live in the urban fabric of Miami. They walk the streets. And I think it's a phenomenal thing. And
so those buildings are coming on.
For sure.
90
You can bank on it.
There you go. Now, you're a very well-known architect in Miami, but also around the world, as you've already discussed. How do you compare yourself with the other architects that have arrived on the scene in the last 10 years?
Look, my grandmother used to say, you should only look at yourself. You should look at yourself and how it is that you interact with people. I don't look at other architects as competition. I look at people like Frank Lloyd Wright. I look at other, Corbusier as inspirational architects and designers for what it is that they saw. 100 years ago, Frank Lloyd Wright was like, well, in the prairie style Minnesota, the natural environment and natural materials and concrete and contemporary, yet warm and woodsy, is what it is that we like. And so I'm a modernist, but I don't like the white boxes. I like materials and finishes that make you feel unique and special to the tropics, or whether you're in Colorado, or whether we're building in Abu Dhabi or Turkmenistan. I think you need to have that sense and grounding of the locale, of who you are and telling the story. So people who go into the building in Cape Town, South Africa, feel it's special, feel that it's unique to them. And I think that's important. And what happens is that as an architect in Florida, at the age I'm in, I'm lucky that other people around the world desire and want that. And they use us for that vehicle. They use us for the design and the conceptualization and the vision of those ideas and those thoughts to implement in their communities.
So how many, this is not on here, one of my questions is going to be, which project are you most proud of and why? Which one's your favorite? But how many, if you were to tally it up, how many projects are you involved in throughout your career? I don't count. You don't count? So you lost count. All right, so what's your favorite?
I have two favorites.
Okay.
I've been working on them for quite a while, and they're still ongoing. There were two boys.
Your sons, okay. That's never going to end. All your boys.
I have a 16 going to be 17, and I have a 22 going to be 23.
Wow. Difference. It's crazy, isn't it?
Well, my wife does most of the work. I just observe it.
Listen, it's interesting. So I have four boys. I have a 21, soon to be 22. That's how I got into real estate when I was 19. I have a 12-year-old and I have 9-year-old twins.
Really? Boys, girls?
All boys.
Really? The twins are boys?
All boys.
Wow.
Right? And what's interesting about it is, my wife says the same thing. Oh, you don't know what's going on in their soccer. You don't know what's going on. But ultimately, as much as our wives are involved, you said they're our biggest project. They're looking to us as their role model.
Always.
No doubt. Always. Last question. I'll let you off the hook. I know your phone's going crazy. You got business going on.
I like this guy, Alex. He's good.
Yeah, I am who I am, man. It is what you.
Craig, I like him, Craig.
With me, you definitely get what you get. That's for sure. Book, podcast, or TED Talk recommendation for the audience. Either of the three, all three, none, I don't care. But if you have a book, a favorite book, or a podcast or a TED Talk that you like, we always end the interviews with this question.
I don't have anything that is my favorite because I take bits and bites from them all. The TED Talks today on social media you can pick up and you can get what it is. It's amazing. I still go to 60 Minutes or a Good Morning America on a Sunday morning at 9 a.m. I still watch those. I still open up the newspaper because I like the feeling of the paper. But as time goes by, all of those elements are feeding information and data. And today I watch Al Jazeera as I would watch the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal. And I don't have enough time to open up the newspaper, so I do sit down quietly, and I can pick it up on the iPhones. But all of those vehicles today give you an opportunity to put your knowledge and information out there. And it's so critical because ultimately what I'm selling is the ability to create spaces that give people the comfort and the social and the home and the mental relaxation. That has to be tied to a good design and has to be tied to a good value.
You know, that's a great question. So I live out in Davie.
Yes.
And we bought, the house is okay, it's 3,000 square feet, small for Davie standards, but we live on a 49,000 square foot lot.
Yes.
We bought it for the land.
Yes.
We bought it for the outside space. How important is the outside space as the interior?
The exterior is primary, the architecture is secondary. The minute you agree to that, I don't care if you've designed the Palace over Versailles or any building from China to Cambodia to Minneapolis, right? The environment is primary. Your 1 acre plus lot, it's what you can do with it and within it on a daily basis that can make it even more special on the architecture on the inside. The architecture is a wall, it's a stage set. But if you understand that, it's creating the outdoor spaces, or in a city, it creates the urban spaces, parks, corner treatments, alleys. All of those spaces become the important spaces that we as a group share. It's where we talk, it's where we study, it's where we meet each other, it's where we create relationships, it's where it gives us the environment to talk to somebody. You can't carry a conversation sitting in a cafe and there's a highway near you, right? Yeah. You need to have the thought process and how to design spaces that work for the individual. And you can see many people used to say, oh, I go to Europe, right, to feel special, or the old Madrid, or I go Roma, or Naples. Or now, if you bring those environments into New York or into Miami, Miami has a great opportunity. Miami is the only subtropical weather capital city that we can have here in the United States of America. You can go to Peru, you can go to Brazil, you can go to Argentina, but this is the only place that you can have a tropical weather urban metropolis. And it will expand from Miami all the way to Palm Beach. And it'll be different. It'll be different in its feeling and in its character. And the individuals who live there. You said in Davie? Yeah. The Latin community in Davie is different than the Latin community in Little Havana, and it's different than the Latin community in Doral. And people are different and how they behave in those environments due to their environment. The people who live in Miami Beach behave different than the individuals who live in Victoria Park and Fort Lauderdale. They have different activities on a daily basis, but those activities need to be shared in a good quality with everybody. I just went up and down the river on the jet ski. The river is so underutilized. It is so underappreciated. It's starting to become now. Sure. You have food and beverage along the river, but the river in the next 10, 20 years is going to be one of the arteries that we have here that is so critical.
There you go. Start investing in the river. Kobi, I'm done. I'm going to go around. Any parting words for the camera?
Best wishes.
Where do they find you, Kobi? What's your website? Instagram?
It's me. It's KobiKarp.com. KobiKarp.com. Feel free to go on there on social media, Instagram, everywhere under that name.
There you go. Thank you, Kobi.
Thank you.